All right. Hello. Today we are talking with activist, artist, uh, dad,
Yeah.
author, Shabazz Larkin. Welcome, Shabazz. Thank you for
Hello,
being here with
hello,
us.
hello. I am so glad to be here. Let's talk about some bees.
Let's talk about them. We have fallen in love with your book, The Thing About Bees, a Love Letter. This is my favorite part. Love will conquer fear. Those are powerful words, Shabazz. Powerful words.
Love will conquer fear.
It,
That's sort of the heart and the energy, the spirit behind the whole project is sort of examining our fear and finding sort of our way through it. And the bees are sort of this really lovely microcosm for that. So let's get into it.
Let's do it. This part also, I want to highlight this comic strip style that you've chosen. When I opened this book, I was like, this speaks to children. This speaks to me. I love this. When a bee and a flower love each other very much, a fruit is born.
True. It's true.
It's
That is what happens.
so this book's been around for a little bit. You wrote this in 2019,
Mm, mm.
but then in 2020, you guys did something really special with it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Wait, what did we do special?
What did you do? You did an audio recording of this book.
Oh, yes, that's right. The audio recording.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So we got to pile my whole family together in a booth, and we all sort of, from the beginning, this was made. We all made this book together. We kind of the images in this book sort of are reminiscent of us like playing in the fields and like romping around Nashville. And so when it came time to do an audiobook, really made sense for us all to sort of like to do that together as well. And yeah, that was a dope experience because there's lots of life and fun, and I've never heard of an audio book with so much vitality in it. So we're very grateful for that. It's a great project.
It is great. And you guys won the American Library Association Notable Children's Recording of
Whoop,
2020.
whoop.
That's a big deal. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So obviously this is a passion project for you, your family, the bees. Can you just share a little bit about how that passion drove you to write this book?
Yeah. So yeah, my kids have become sort of the centerpiece of my life, as your kids, any parent, their kids become the centerpiece of their lives. And I think that early on, I there was a lot of thought and conversation between my wife and I about legacy and what we leave behind, and how responsible we are with this earth that we're living in. And there was also a lot of conversation about sort of falling, you know, the the falling population of bees. So the bees we started to feel like there was less bees coming into the world, and so uh, it kind of struck us at that time that there is this sort of like interesting relationship with these bees, that hey, I'm actually have this like extraordinary fear of bees, like. And in the book, I call it this ridiculous fear of bees, because I'm kind of known to be the guy who, when a bee comes, like I'm sort of, running away from it. Almost, I could be next to my children. My boys will be next to me and they see the bee and they're just laughing. But I see the bee and I'm running out of the way. And, but at this, so I have this ridiculous fear, but I know at the same time that this is this sort of like precious life, this very precious living thing, that this organism that we have in the earth. And I think that cover that we mentioned, Love Will Conquer Fear, is about really understanding how to hold both, right? Like, okay, on one hand, I am very afraid of these bees. because of a traumatic experience I had as a child, and watching someone get stung, and going to the hospital. And then on the other hand is, hey, these bees are sort of in decline. And if I kind of wish them away, I'm sort of wishing away the existence of the earth, of humanity, really. And so this book was really born out of saying, like, I can hold both of these at once. I can sort of like do something to understand them and not pass this fear along to my kids. Just because you're afraid of something doesn't mean that you can learn to not be afraid of it. And sort of the whole premise of the book is, if you can begin to take a second to step back and to learn something about the thing that you're afraid of, in this case, bees, that because I'm afraid of bees. If I learn more about it, then I can feel less afraid of it. And so I always tell my sons that in order to love something, you have to put your eyes on it. If you want to love something, you got to look at it. And if you don't have eyes, then you got to put your ears on it. And if you don't have ears, then you got to put your hands on it. But the idea is that to love something is to understand it. And so so this book is really born out of saying, hey, let me sort of understand bees to the point so that I can sort of not be afraid of them anymore. And that's what.
And I think you've done that. You've absolutely done that. And I think that we all see the inner teacher in you, because not only did you understand the bees, you want other people to understand the bees. And I think that is what we see in this book. We see the love in that. And as a teacher and as students, we want to understand things. So we've got some burning questions from some kids, burning questions. My friend Dean wants to know why you chose bees to write about.
Yeah. You know, bees are so special. You know, bees are very special. They have such a special role. And before researching this book, I didn't know that if the bees went away, then so much of what we rely on. And actually, my book really focuses on food because, you know, Philip, you know, at Readers to Ears, and we really like to talk about food, right? That's sort of food justice, you know, food, food for all, and sort of like food literacy is sort of the kind of thing that we like to make books about. But really, actually, it goes way beyond just food. It goes to clothes, the cotton that we wear. You know, they all sort of rely on the bees. And so it's such an incredible little precious insect that we don't think so much about. But really, before it came along, there was no other species that had such a powerful ability to sort of pollinate the earth. Right. So butterflies and birds and wind, those things can pollinate, but they don't come close to the power of the bees for pollination. So I think that's such a beautiful thing for us all to recognize. There's a lot to be thankful for our bees, even though they could be a little scary at times.
But they're the only insect on the planet that we eat what they make. You know, like we avoid everything that other insects make, but we eat what a bee makes. And that is a powerful thing.
It is a very powerful thing. Mm-hmm.
Armand wants to know how long it took you to research the bees.
Actually, so this was a long process, and I give a lot of thanks to my squad at Readers to Ears. We all sort of like pitched in and did lots of reading, and there was actually, so when I wrote this book, I was working from a coffee shop in Culpeper, Virginia, which is sort of like just outside of DC. And I went there every day and I would write, and, you know, I kind of do revisions and, you know, kind of, you know, change things. And across the street was a woman who sold honey in a shop called La Vida Loca. La Vida Loca. And she's one of the most loveliest people. She's sort of like traveled all around the world, you know, working to sort of like to help people in need. She worked all these sort of like NGO organizations, and we'd sit there and have conversations about bees, and she had a little beehive upstairs in her shop, and I'd go kind of look at that and we'd talk about bees. But we took a good couple of months to really kind of examine and make sure that we're talking about all the things properly. But guess what? It doesn't take that much to sort of doesn't take that much research to realize how powerful and important the bees are. I mean, after 5 minutes of sort of reading about the power of bees, I think that we all really understood the gravity of the project that we were taking on. So while we did take a long time, we really didn't need to, because the bees are undefeated. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's fun to research. Like, I've learned amazing things, and like every little nugget of information I've learned, I want to know more. So I think it's also like you just keep going. Well, Virginia wants to know, what's your favorite bee?
Virginia. First of all, I love your name, Virginia. I'm from Virginia. I love Virginia. My favorite bee is, although like I hate to say it, it's probably the carpenter bee. And the reason why I hate to say it is because they drill these little holes on the side of your house, but they can kind of be a little bit of a nuisance. And they've definitely drilled some holes in the side of my house. But I do love their little fluffy fur jacket. And so I know that they're sort of one of the friendliest of the bees. And so I like the carpenter bee.
That's a good answer. I like the carpenter bee too. I have a playhouse in my backyard, and the carpenter bees love drilling holes in it. So we might just give it to the carpenter bees and let them make their
Let
own
them do it.
nest out of it. Well, Eliza was wondering, how many times did you have to draw the pictures to make them look good?
Oh man. Well, actually my process is different from I've had to draw them a few times, but my process, I like to draw them. I work in a lot of layers. And so you could see from the work that I do, like, you could see the red underneath the blue, underneath the yellow. And so there's lots and layers that I create. And so when I work, if I don't like something, I just paint over it. And I just keep on, I just kind of keep noodling and noodling and noodling at it. And yeah, that's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I love that. And it definitely comes across in your artwork. I think one time you had talked about how a lot of the lines in the book mimic like the movement of your children. So there's a lot of movement in the picture that isn't necessarily, it's not telling the story, but it is telling the story. And I
Yeah.
think that's really special.
There's a story sort of underneath the story of the bees, which is why this is called a love letter, because this is, I always like to say, hey, while this is a book about the bees, this is also sort of a book about my relationship with my sons and sort of understanding how to be a father to my sons. And they bring tons of joy, just as all you are watching bring joy to your parents. Uh, sometimes it's hard to sort of understand how to relate, and but you learn, and there's lots of energy and joy and vitality. And I hope that the illustrations and the way that the paint sort of splatted all over the place sort of reflects that joy and energy that being a child brings to their parents.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. It's a lot of movement and a lot of fun. My friend Bodie wants to know if you always wanted to be an author when you were a kid.
You know what? I never wanted to be an author. I didn't really aspire to sort of write books. I always wanted to be a poet. And so my brother, when I was a young man, he would bring me to these open mic poetry sessions, and I would watch him do the lovely poems. He was a rapper. He had a little local group called the Ingleside Tribe, and they wrote raps about Martin Luther King and justice in the neighborhood. And I always surprise him when I talk about that. But I always admired that, the poetry, and just sort of like the use of words to sort of make images come to life. And I always wanted to write those, but poetry is not a very popular medium anymore. I actually have another book called Amuse Bouche. I brought it. That's the one.
Yeah.
This is actually full of poems that I had wrote. Not a lot of people have bought this book actually, because people don't know what to do with poems. But it's one of those books where when people buy it, they're like, oh, I'm so glad that I found this. It's like one that you don't really reach for, but once you do, you love it, because poetry is so fun for everybody. And so I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to bring poetry to life. And when Philip reached out to me and asked me, hey, what kind of book I'm going to do now, when it came time to think of this book, it was like, hey, I just want to do a poem. So I'm glad that we made it into a book as well.
Yeah, it's definitely got a sing-songy quality to it. And I think, I tell you from a teacher's point of view, what you do with poetry, you read it aloud, because it really helps young readers and struggling readers, because it has a tone to it. And I think that is another gift within this book. And obviously I'm going to purchase the other book, because I do love that poetry aspect too. I think it's great. Speaking of books, Chrissy wants to know, what's the next book?
Chrissy, thanks for asking. I think that my next book will be about mindfulness. Mindfulness has been a very important part of my life, and it's sort of changed the way that I live from a day-to-day basis. And after the year that we've had last year, was very hard. It was hard for me and hard for everyone in the United States and across the whole entire world. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I just had this inkling in my heart that I needed to focus on my breath. I wrote it on my mirror, focus on your breath. And I said that to myself every single day since a year ago. Literally a year. It's been a year, because just this time we had a tornado come through our town. Before the pandemic even happened, we had a tornado come through Nashville. And it's just been a year of only focusing on my breath. And now my son's, my meditation practice was a very personal practice before, but now my wife and I practice together. My kids and I practice together. We all take time to breathe together. And that has been such an important, impactful experience for me. Like I thought it's so important that that'll likely be what the next book will be about. And I'm hoping that my sons will be in it with me.
I'm sure they will. Why wouldn't they? I mean, you're practicing it daily. I think that's wonderful. So what are some things that you think that we can do to help the bees just in our own backyard? Just what can kids do to help?
Yeah, well, I'm actually a very big proponent of just understanding. And so I think that I have this sort of belief that we become what we pay attention to. And when we sort of take the time to understand what the bees are about, when we take the time to sort of like see what their mission is, we begin to get an understanding of how the world works. What I mean by the world, I mean the earth, our ecosystems. What's the relationship to the bees, to the flower, which is analogous, meaning it matches our relationship to all kinds of things. Our relationship to the grass outside, our relationship to the trees, our relationship to the air, our relationship to the food that we eat, and the things that we put into the world. Especially as an artist, we get a chance to put things into the world that people get to enjoy. And I always tell my sons, who are new budding artists, because they see their father and they want to be artists as well, is that the thing that you put into the earth, you have a responsibility to. And so the bees, to me, teach us that. So I think that I think observation of our environment is the very first and most beautiful thing that you can do to sort of begin to protect the bees and protect our world is just to observe it, to understand that the water that is there wasn't always there and might not always be there, right? The air that we breathe isn't on every planet on the earth or in the solar system. It doesn't have the air that we breathe, and our air can be ruined just like those other planets as well. The water that we drink, the grass that breathes, the grass and trees, as we saw in Australia, and they had these wildfires that just most of Australia is burning. Is we can't take those for granted. And just as now, as we see that a polar vortex has come through Texas and all the way through the middle of the United States, these things are not anomalies. These things are anomalies, which means they are things that don't happen normally. But if we pay attention to these things and ask ourselves, why are these things happening? Where do these things come from? From our trees to our fish to our animals to our birds and all these things. If we just observe these things, and it's our duty as being creatures on earth, being humans and being a species, as we like to say, at the top of the food chain. That comes with a great responsibility to understand the whole food chain and to understand our whole ecosystem. So my thing is, if you have Alexa, ask her everything. You can, if you got one of these Alexas. When I was a kid, we had an encyclopedia, and you had to go to the shelf and you had to look stuff up, and and maybe some other people, they might go on Google or whatever. But now, if you got an Alexa in your house, just ask her anything. Oh, where do the bees come from? What makes a waterfall? Your curiosity can save the world. And so that is what I have to say to all of my friends listening.
Wow. Well, when you get to talking on that, I hear that rap background that when you went and listened to your brother, and you would get on that like stream of consciousness of like, how do you change the world? Those are all great points. And I think right in our own backyards, we can start watching those bees and seeing what we can do to help them. And it's a beautiful sentiment, and we appreciate it so much. Last question for you. What would you recommend for kids who want to write their own book?
This is what I would recommend for kids that want to write their own book. Write your book. Write it. Don't draw it. Don't think about it too much. Just write it. Write it down. Put your words down. And then after you write your words down, if you want to add pictures, and not all books have pictures, but if you want to add pictures, add some pictures. And I know you're thinking, I can't draw, or maybe I can draw, but I don't know how. Just draw it anyways. Draw it any way that you think describes it, because I think that the beautiful thing about making a book, if you want to make a book, it sort of just takes just putting something on a piece of paper to get that thing started. And you'd be surprised that when you begin to put something on a piece of paper, how it begins to come to life. If you're a young person and you might be sort of intimidated by how to do a book, I bet if you wrote the book and you began to show it to your teachers and you began to show it to your librarian, and you began to find out how to be friends with me, and you sent it to me, then you're going to get some really, really good advice on how to turn that idea into something. Because every book starts with an idea, but until you put that idea on a piece of paper, it'll just stay an idea. So the very first step one, put it on paper. Okay. Step two will take care of itself. I promise you. Put it on a piece of paper and it will go where you want it to go.
That's great advice. Perfect. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Go to readerstoeaters.com to get your own copy of this book and even more titles. Obviously, there are more books out there in this kind of vein. And what's next for you, Shahbaz? What's next for what you're doing to teach the world about your passions?
Well, I guess we'll all see. We'll find out. I'm hoping, I'm hoping that we can sort of, stay healthy and stay strong, and to keep wearing our masks, and to stay safe out there, because we're coming close to an end of this madness that we've all experienced. And so, this year has been a year of saying no to everything. I've said no to so many times this year, to so many projects, and I've just been able to focus on my family. And I think that that's important. We think so much of, like, in the future, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And until we realize, actually, like, we can also just stop and we can just enjoy our family. We can enjoy ourselves. We can enjoy the life that we are in right now, here in this. So that's that. And when I say now, here in this, that's very much a mindfulness sort of principle. And I guess I'm ultimately saying I'll probably be doing something in mindfulness.
Excellent. Well, perfect. We look forward to more mindfulness from you. Thank you so much, Shabazz.
Thank you so much, Emily.